You are now listening to Mark the Medium of Mark's Unexplained World on Hinckley Community Radio, a non-profit podcast radio station. Tonight's episode is about the Philip experiment.
Back in September 1972, the Toronto Society for Psychical Research, along with a poltergeist expert, Dr. A.R. George Owen, set out to accomplish one singular objective: to create a ghost or spirit. Not to conjure, not to contact, but to actually create. They wanted to explore the Tibetan Buddhist concept of tulpas, otherwise known as thought forms, the practice of willing tangible forms into existence by using their own innate mental energies that were present from birth. In this experiment, the Canadian group succeeded in creating classic séance phenomena such as tapping noises and table tipping, while communicating with this self-created fictional spirit whose identity, personality and memories were all what the group had created. Greetings, Unexplainers. Thank you for tuning in and listening to another mind-gripping, no-holds-barred episode of Mark's Unexplained World. My name is Mark Hughes. I'm a psychic medium, an 80s rocker, and a man who often talks to himself, much to the annoyance of the missus. Do you? Yes, I do. Don't you? In this episode, I'm going to tell you the strange story about the Philip experiment. And this week's necessary disclaimer: you listen at your own discretion. All opinions and comments are strictly my own, but the facts still remain. I also apologise again if I pronounce anything incorrectly. My English, although it is my first and only language, I often forget that fact and start talking backwards instead. Be warned. Anyway, back we go to the story. The Toronto Society for Psychical Research, otherwise known as the TSPR for short, was founded in the early 1970s to explore and interpret any paranormal events commonly described as extrasensory perception and psychic phenomena. The Philip experiment was a parapsychology experiment that was conducted between the years of 1972 and 1977, based in Toronto, Ontario, to determine whether subjects can actually communicate with fictionalized ghosts or spirits through the expectations of human will. The group consisted of 8 members, all of who decided to address the experiment by asking certain questions that often arise regarding the field of psychokinetic phenomena during mediumship sittings such as tapping noises or table tipping. Some of the questions posed were as follows. Do they require the presence of at least one person gifted with psychic powers, i.e. a medium? Can they be produced in full light, allowing them to be clearly filmed? And are they caused by a disembodied spirit, or rather by unconscious psychokinetic activity on the part of the participants themselves? The group proposed to recreate the conditions of a spiritual séance, but with several certain key differences. Number 1, no one who claimed to have any mediumistic or psychic powers would be present, and 2, attempts would be made to conduct a fictional entity created purely for the purpose of the séance rather than a genuinely deceased individual. The original group members were Al, who was a self-employed heating engineer and whose hobbies included scouting and photography; Lorne, who was an industrial engineer and an artist who studied ancient history and Oriental philosophy; Andy, Lorne's wife, who was also an artist and shared Lorne's interest in astronomy. She was also the one who drew a picture of the fictional Philip; Bernice, an accountant who was interested in philosophy; Dorothy, a housewife who was trained in bookkeeping and accounting, though not a qualified accountant, and whose main hobby was scouting like Al; Sydney, the youngest member of the group who was a sociology student currently taking time off university to work as a salesman; Sue, who was the chairman of the Canadian chapter of Mensa and a former nurse. She originated the background story of Philip. And last of all, Iris, the wife of Dr. George Owen, who was the director of the New Horizons Research Foundation. She also co-founded the Toronto Society for Psychical Research. Her career also involved nursing, social work, and leadership in these fields. She was also the primary author of the 1976 book, Conjuring Up Philip. Dr. George Owen and Dr. Joel Witten, a psychiatrist, were also present, but only as observers of the experiment. On an interesting side note, the New Horizons Research Foundation, who Iris Owen was the director of, was incorporated as a non-profit organisation in the 1970s for the following purposes: to promote interest in and the study of the extension of the frontiers of knowledge by research, particularly in respect of archaeology, anthropology, psychology, parapsychology, history of civilizations, comparative study of systems of religion and ethics, and any related areas of natural philosophy. The story of Philip was invented by the former nurse and TSPR member Sue. She was assigned the task of putting together the fictional ghost's background story, which she did as follows.
Philip was an aristocratic Englishman living in the time of Oliver Cromwell in the mid-1600s. He was a Catholic who supported the king and was married to the beautiful but frigid and cruel wife Dorothea. While he was out riding one day, he caught sight of a beautiful raven-haired gypsy girl called Margot, and he instantly fell in love. Bringing her back with him to live in his gatehouse, he kept their affair a secret, but his wife Dorothea found out and accused Margot of witchcraft and husband stealing. Afraid to lose his reputation and possessions, Philip did not protest at Margot's trial, and she was burned at the stake. Stricken with remorse, Philip then took to pacing the battlements in despair, and finally committed suicide by throwing himself off a high wall.
Each member of the group was instructed to memorise the story and try to visualise Philip, making him as real as their minds could possibly make him. They all agreed on the aspects of what he looked like, his personality and his preferences. And group member Andy drew his portrait to make it easier for them. The group then decided they would attempt to cause him to manifest. The group members decided that they would make a commitment to meet every week for a year for a Philip session. Every week, they would sit in a circle around a table with Andy's drawing of Philip in its centre for reference, or alternatively, they would use a piece of aluminized cardboard on the floor instead of the table in the hope of causing Philip to fully materialise on it. The sittings were never in complete darkness, but rather in candlelight or low-coloured lights. After a period of quiet meditation, they would then share what they had felt or experienced during that meditation, followed by more meditation. The length of the meditation increased over time as the group members became more accustomed to it. During their discussions, they continued to develop Philip as a character, solidifying their collective thoughts regarding his personality and getting to know him better. And in time, they actually found themselves becoming completely convinced that he had really existed. However, after a year had passed, there were no significant results. It was at this point that the group member, Iris Owen, started to read some papers written by psychic researchers C. Brooks Smith, D. W. Hunt and K. J. Batchelder. They described various techniques that were used during 19th century séances. The papers said that first, the participants should sit around in a very relaxed and jolly atmosphere, and then they should try singing some songs and hymns or making jokes and carrying on with a conversation. So, having read the advice, the group decided to adjust their methodology, although they still continued to work in full light and without designating anyone as a medium. On the third or fourth session, having conducted the meetings in this way, the group suddenly felt a vibration in the tabletop. It was too quiet to hear at first, but slowly and gradually it became more audible. Then, slowly, the table began to move randomly around the room, moving backwards and forwards and tipping back and forth. Anyone who has taken part in a table tipping session will know exactly what the phenomenon looks like and feels like. All the members of the group could clearly see that no living person was either pushing or rapping on the table. After a few sessions, group member Dorothy suddenly exclaimed,
"I wonder if Philip is doing this,"
which was then answered by a loud knocking on the table. After a short break, we'll look further into the Philip experiment and the interesting subject of tulpas.
This show is brought to you by courtesy of Neil Packer and the Haunted Antiques Paranormal Research Centre. Find them online at www.hauntedresearchcentre.com or at 9 to 11 Regent Street, Hinckley, LE10 1AW. Open Saturdays from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. for guided tours of the haunted rooms at just £3 per person. Booking is essential at all times and over 16s only, unless accompanied by an adult. The haunted rooms are extremely haunted, and paranormal activity could, and has, taken place at any time. Some areas and particular objects or items can be quite scary and unnerving. Why not pay them a visit to see for yourself? Membership is available for £25 to qualify for selective discounts. And why not download the app, available on both iOS and Android, for only £3.99 to keep you up to date with what's coming up at the centre.
Fright Nights was established in 1999 and was the first company in the world to offer overnight ghost hunt experiences to the general public, pioneering paranormal events since the last century. Now, over 23 years old, hundreds of ghost hunts join Fright Nights every month for the most thrilling ghost hunting experience worth remembering. If you have never been on a ghost hunt before, then why not join them on an event to see what it's all about? Fright Nights currently operate at hundreds of the UK's most haunted and exclusive venues with their teams of experienced paranormal investigators, mediums and psychics. You are guaranteed a quality night of ghost hunting unequalled by any other company. They have a VIP members club for regular returning guests, offering discounts and exclusive event invitations. And they can host private events for you and your friends, clubs or work colleagues. They have also expanded their new Friends of Fright Nights pages with many more new things to come. So why not book early with a small deposit so you don't miss out? The balance is due 28 days prior to the event. Contact them on 07852 998 628 or email at frightnightsevents@gmail.com. That's frightnightsevents@gmail.com. Or why not visit their website www.frightnights.co.uk, where you can see the many locations they investigate and learn a lot more about them and the opportunities they have available. You can also visit their many social media sites for up-to-date information on all the places they have been to and what's coming up in the future. They look forward to seeing you soon. Fright Nights Ghost Hunting Events. Remember, only the original will do.
So, from that moment on, Philip seemed to be present at all of the sessions regularly, knocking in response to questions and even rapping in time to songs. And he also had a way of knocking that sounded just like laughter when one of the group members told a joke. Using one knock for yes and two knocks for no, the group asked Philip to tell them his story, to see if this would match up to their own creative conception, and this generally proved to be the case. Any new material could usually be traced to an earlier comment made by one of the group members, as was always the case when Philip gave historically inaccurate answers, which could always be traced to an incorrect knowledge on the part of the group. Although the group remained totally aware that they had created Philip, they also came to treat him as a member of the group. The group would greet him at the beginning of each session with a cheerful good morning or good evening, and he would knock on the table, actually under each individual group member's hand. Of course, Philip was a very versatile spirit, and there were other physical manifestations. For example, the coloured lights would flicker on and off on request, and some particular movements of the table could be felt as answers to certain questions posed. The table tipping movements became increasingly varied. It would tilt up on two legs or on one leg, rock in time to music, slide towards anyone new entering the room, revolve in a waltzing movement, or even chase people, while group members tried to keep their hands on the table. Eventually, the table actually levitated entirely off the floor. On one occasion, they placed a piece of candy on the table, which then subsequently tilted to a 45-degree angle, without the candy falling off. But when the group tried themselves and tilted the table to a similar 45-degree angle, the candy then fell off in a normal way. I actually witnessed a similar phenomenon myself recently. I was running a table tipping experience at a haunted location. Before the session starts, I put 3 tea lights in the centre of the table and usually ask 5 or 6 guests present to place their hands around the edge of the table. By calling out for movement, the table started to slowly shake, and then eventually it rocked backwards and forwards. At one point, when the table hovered at nearly 50-degree angle, the 3 tea lights still never moved. They remained static. It was as if they were being held or glued onto the surface of the table. When the session was over, one of the guests, who was rightly a little sceptical, went to move the tea lights, which he was able to do with no problem, confirming that they were never stuck to the table as he might have thought. Not only that, but when he went to manually tip the table himself, the lights fell off at the first opportunity. Anyway, back to the Philip group. It was found that their table tipping phenomena could occur with as few as 4 members. I myself have seen it done with as few as 2 people on the table. During the summer of 1974, the group took a brief break from its weekly meetings. However, even in their own homes, some of the members started to experience poltergeist phenomena. Eventually, the group decided to open their doors to the public, inviting others to bear witness to their strange séances. So, let's now talk about tulpas for a bit. What is a tulpa? And do tulpas really exist? A tulpa is a concept in theosophy, mysticism and the paranormal of a materialized thought form, typically in human form, such as an imaginary friend or a being that is created through spiritual practice and intense concentration. Modern practitioners who call themselves tulpamancers use the term to refer to a type of willed imaginary friend which practitioners consider to be a sentient and relatively independent. French explorer and spiritualist Alexandra David Neil stated that she had observed Buddhist tulpa creation practices in the 20th century Tibet. She described tulpas as, and I quote,
magic formations generated by powerful concentration of thought.
Alexandra David Neil believed that a tulpa could develop a mind of its own, and again I quote,
once the tulpa is endowed with enough vitality to be capable of playing the part of a real being, it tends to free itself from its maker's control.
According to David Neil, this happens almost mechanically, just as a child, when their body is fully developed and able to leave its mother's womb. She said she had created such a tulpa in the image of a jolly Friar Tuck-like monk, which she claimed had developed independent thought and as a result had to be destroyed. Alexandra David Neil raised the possibility that her experience was illusory, and I quote,
I may have created my own hallucination.
Although she has subsequently said that others could see her thought forms, that she had created. Influenced by depictions in television and cinema from the 1990s and 2000s, the term tulpa started to be adopted and used to refer to a type of willed imaginary friend. Practitioners consider tulpas to be sentient and relatively autonomous. Online communities dedicated to tulpas spawned on the 4chan and Reddit websites. I also believe there is a Facebook group dedicated to helping people create their very own tulpa. These communities refer to tulpa practitioners as tulpamancers. These communities gained popularity when adult fans of My Little Pony started to discuss tulpas of character taken from the My Little Pony television series. Fans attempted to use both meditation and lucid dreaming techniques to create their very own imaginary friends. One example of this is the Slender Man, who has been described by some people as a tulpa effect and attributed to multiple people's thought processes. So I suppose if enough people meditated over Father Christmas, do you think he may actually appear one Christmas morning in your own front room munching a mince pie? Something to think about. Anyway, let's get back to the Philip experiment. Although the Toronto Society for Psychical Research couldn't explain the supernatural activity surrounding the séance table, the table tipping and the knocking, there are several possible explanations for what may have happened during the Philip experiments. Philip never physically manifested as an apparition visibly to all, only strange noises and rappings while the group huddled together round a table. This may indicate that it was all a product of the human mind, or perhaps a manifestation of their collective unconscious thoughts. The accurate answers that Philip gave to so many questions, for example, may have arisen from the group's own collective subconscious thoughts and knowledge, as in creating a tulpa. It could also have been an odd form of confirmation bias, or groupthink, or an extreme example of the power of suggestion. Or perhaps their shared belief created a shared delusion, like a group-wide hallucination. Other people think that the group may have opened a door, so to speak, or that Philip was in fact a ghost, or worse, a demon, playing along with the participants' desires to create a thought form. If that is indeed the case, then they probably didn't design a tulpa. They may have actually conjured a spirit. Apparently, subsequent experiments involving other groups and other fictional characters have had similar results. In an attempt to show that the Philip experiment could be replicated, another group of people comprised of entirely different members of the Toronto Society for Psychical Research similarly created and visualized a different character's name, Lilith. Lilith was a French-Canadian girl who became a member of the French resistance in World War II and was captured and shot as a spy. Within 5 weeks of when they started the group sittings, this new group began to get movement on the table, followed by knocks, which answered the question posed in the character of the fictional girl. As a result of this second experiment, the Toronto Society for Psychical Research asserts that any group of people can acquire the ability to generate such phenomena. So, when a group of people sit around a table doing a Ouija board, glass divination, or table tipping, Is it a spirit they are talking to, a group hallucination, or a form of tulpa? I guess we'll never really know, but that's why it's called paranormal, because no one really knows. I think as long as you are respectful to whoever or whatever you are actually in contact with, it doesn't really matter. Just enjoy the experience. Ultimately, if we are to be honest, the Philip experiment wasn't really what you would call an experiment as such. I mean, there was no corresponding control group or any real scientific methodology involved. But whether they conjured a spirit, manifested their own unconscious wills, or participated in a shared hallucination, the results of this endeavour are still a profound example of the power of the human mind.
Thank you all for taking the time out to listen to this episode of Mark's Unexplained World. Next time, we are going to look at the Gill family disappearance. The Gill family disappearance occurred on the 13th of January in the year 2002 in the Entre Rios province of Argentina. The family lived on the Candelaria Estancia, where Reuben Gill and his wife Margarita both worked as landlords and partook in various other local jobs. The 6 members of this family all vanished without a trace, and their whereabouts still remain unknown to this day. This case has been characterised as mysterious by much of the press and those involved in it.
This show was written by myself, Mark Hughes, and proofread and edited by Linda Hughes. The actors in this episode were Mark Hughes, Linda Hughes and Denise Pula, with special thanks to Neil Packer and the staff at the Haunted Antiques Paranormal Research Centre in Hinckley. And a big thanks to everyone at Hinckley Community Radio. Mark's Unexplained World, because there's more to the paranormal than meets the third eye. And remember guys, keep it real, because being real is better than being perfect. This show and all its contents are covered by basic copyright of Mark the Medium.